Elisabeth Abegg, the diarist who hid Jews in her basement for years, February 27th, 1943, 11:30 p.m., Berlin, Germany. The air raid sirens are screaming, a deafening mechanical wail that vibrates through the cobblestones of the Tempelhof district. The sky is an apocalyptic canvas of sweeping searchlights and the orange glow of burning buildings. Inside a modest apartment at 74 Tempelhofer Dam, the floorboards shake as a British Lancaster bomber drops a high explosive payload a few streets away. The dust falls from the ceiling like gray snow, but the woman sitting at the dining room table is not looking at the ceiling. Elisabeth Abegg is 60 years old. She is adjusting her wire-rimmed spectacles. In her hands is a stack of Lebensmittelkarten, German food ration cards. They are meticulously, flawlessly forged. Suddenly, a sound cuts through the distant thunder of the bombing raid. It is a sharp, aggressive pounding on her front door. Gestapo. Elizabeth's breath catches in her throat. In the adjoining room lies her completely paralyzed 86-year-old mother, and directly beneath her feet, hiding in the cramped, freezing darkness of her basement, are 12 Jewish men, women, and children. They are fugitives from the Fabrikation, the massive SS operation currently sweeping Berlin to deport the last remaining Jews to Auschwitz. If the secret police breach the door, the people in the basement will be sent to the gas chambers. Elisabeth and her invalid mother will be sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp to be worked to death. The heavy fists pound again. A voice barks in German demanding entry in the name of the state. Elisabeth does not run. She does not reach for a weapon because she has none. She gathers the forged ration cards, slides them into a hollowed-out compartment inside a thick encyclopedia, and places it back on the shelf. She smooths her conservative wool dress. She walks to the door, unlocks the deadbolt, and swings it open. She stares directly into the eyes of 2 heavily armed SS officers. She does not cower. She looks at them with the absolute icy authority of a strict Prussian schoolteacher whose classroom has just been interrupted. To understand the terrifying quiet courage required to hide the hunted inside the very capital of the Third Reich, we must look at a woman who weaponized her own invisibility. Elisabeth Abegg was not a spy dropped from a bomber. She was born on March 3rd, 1882, in Strasbourg. She was a woman of deep intellect and profound moral conviction. She devoted her life to education, becoming a history teacher at the prestigious Luisen-Mädchenschule, a girls' school in central Berlin. She believed that history was not just a collection of dates, but a moral compass. Following the mechanized slaughter of the First World War, she became a Quaker. She embraced absolute pacifism, believing that every human life contained a divine spark that could not be extinguished by the state. For decades, she lived a quiet, respectable life. She taught her female students to think critically, to question authority, and to value human rights. Then came 1933. Adolf Hitler was appointed chancellor. The poison of Nazism rapidly infected the German education system. Teachers were ordered to swear a personal oath of loyalty to the Führer. They were mandated to teach racial pseudoscience and anti-Semitism. Elisabeth Abegg absolutely refused. She stood in her classroom and continued to teach truth. She openly criticized the regime. She refused to hang the swastika portrait on her wall. The retaliation was swift and bureaucratic. She was interrogated by the authorities, classified as politically unreliable, and violently forced out of the profession she loved. She was 51 years old. She was stripped of her livelihood, her pension threatened, and her reputation smeared. The Nazi regime expected her to fade away, into the shadows, a defeated, aging spinster. They expected her to tend to her paralyzed mother and her sister Julie in quiet submission. They severely underestimated the iron will of a woman who actually believed in the history she taught. If they would not let her teach the future of Germany, she would dedicate her life to saving those the regime was trying to erase. The true horror began in October 1941. The Gestapo initiated the systematic deportation of Berlin's Jewish population to the extermination camps in the east. Elisabeth watched her friends, her former colleagues, and her neighbors receive the dreaded yellow envelopes ordering them to report to the transport trains. Elisabeth opened her door. Her 3.5-room apartment in Tempelhof was dangerously located. It was surrounded by loyal Nazi Party members. A single suspicious neighbor, a single whisper to the block warden meant a death sentence. But Elisabeth realized something vital. The SS, blinded by their own patriarchal and ageist ideology, did not look twice at a frail 60-year-old woman caring for her disabled mother. They were hunting young, military-age saboteurs. They were not hunting retired schoolteachers. Elisabeth weaponized their prejudice. Her apartment became the most dangerous safe house in Berlin. When a Jewish family knocked on her door in the dead of night, terrified and stripped of their legal existence, Elisabeth took them in. She hid them in her spare rooms, her basement, and even in her own bed while she slept in a chair. But providing shelter was only the first logistical nightmare. An undocumented person in Nazi Germany did not officially exist, which meant they had no access to the heavily regulated food supply. Hiding a dozen extra people meant Elisabeth had to feed them. She became the mastermind of a massive clandestine supply chain. She sold her family's antique jewelry piece by piece on the black market to raise cash. She contacted her former students, the girls she had taught to think critically years before. Many of these young women had been forced into the Bund Deutscher Mädel, League of German Girls, wearing the Nazi uniform, but they remained loyal to their teacher. Elisabeth recruited them. These young women, moving freely through Berlin under the protective camouflage of the swastika, acted as her couriers. They smuggled food, money, and blank identity papers to Elisabeth's apartment. Elisabeth then became a master forger. Working by the dim light of a desk lamp, she altered ration cards, stamped fake travel permits, and created new identities for the people hiding in her basement. The psychological toll was unimaginable. Every single day was a tightrope walk over a furnace. She had to maintain the absolute illusion of a quiet, lonely household. When the air raid sirens wailed, which they did almost every night by 1943, the German civilians would rush to the public underground bunkers. Elisabeth could not go. If she went to the bunker, the block wardens would search her empty apartment for fire hazards and find the hidden Jews. So, while thousands of tons of Allied high explosives rained down on Berlin, shattering windows and leveling entire city blocks, Elisabeth sat in her living room. She held her paralyzed mother's hand, feeling the concussions shake the earth, silently praying the roof would hold. She risked being blown to pieces every night just to maintain her cover. This brings us back to the freezing night of February 27th, 1943, the fabric action. The SS officers stand on her threshold. They are aggressive, hyped on adrenaline, looking for Jews who have slipped the net. They demand to search the premises. Elisabeth does not flinch. She draws herself up to her full height. She channels every ounce of aristocratic Prussian authority she can muster. She looks at the young officers and speaks to them not as an equal, but as a deeply disappointed authority figure. She tells them her mother is severely ill and currently sleeping. She informs them that disturbing a loyal German household in the middle of a bombing raid is a disgrace to their uniforms. She speaks with such sharp, commanding diction that the young men, conditioned from birth to blindly obey their teachers and elders, actually hesitate. They look at the gray-haired woman. They look at the medical equipment visible in the hallway. The illusion is perfect. It is just a tired old woman and her dying mother. The officers apologize. They tip their caps. They turn around and walk back out into the street. Elisabeth closes the door. She locks the deadbolt. Her knees finally give way, and she slides down the wooden frame, her heart threatening to crack her ribs. Beneath her, in the dark, 12 people take their first breath in 10 minutes. Over the course of the war, Elisabeth Abegg sheltered, fed, and organized the escape of approximately 80 Jewish men, women, and children. She funneled them out of Berlin, using her forged papers to send them to the Swiss border or to remote safe houses in East Prussia. She didn't just save their bodies, she fought to save their minds. Understanding that the Jewish children in her care had been banned from schools for years, Elisabeth held secret classes in her apartment. While the Gestapo patrolled outside, she sat at her dining table and taught these terrified children literature, history, and mathematics. She refused to let the Nazis steal their intellect. She also kept a diary. Recognizing the immense historical gravity of what was happening, she documented the stories, the fears, and the humanity of the people she hid. She knew that if they were killed, the Nazis would erase their memory. Elisabeth's pen ensured they would not be forgotten. In May 1945, the Soviet Red Army smashed into Berlin. The Third Reich was reduced to smoking, pulverized rubble. Elisabeth Abegg walked out of her apartment into the ruined streets. She had survived. Her mother had survived. And dozens of the people she had hidden had survived. But when the war ended, the Germany that emerged was desperate to forget. The nation was entirely focused on its own victimhood, eager to bury the horrific crimes of the Holocaust. Elisabeth, now in her late 60s, refused to let them forget. She resumed her teaching career, dedicating her final years to rebuilding the German educational system based on democracy, tolerance, and the absolute necessity of civil rights. She became an active member of the Social Democratic Party and a tireless advocate for the Quaker principles of peace. For a long time, her heroism was a quiet private truth known only to the people whose lives she had saved. But those people never forgot the elderly teacher who opened her door when the rest of the world slammed it shut. On May 23, 1967, the State of Israel and Yad Vashem officially recognized Elisabeth Abegg as righteous among the nations. It is the highest honor granted to non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. She passed away in Berlin on August 8, 1974, at the age of 92. When we study the Second World War, we are naturally drawn to the explosive narratives of soldiers, spies, and assassins. We look for heroism in the cockpit of a fighter plane or behind the sights of a submachine gun. But Elisabeth Abegg's story forces us to look in the mirror and ask a much more uncomfortable question. What would we do if the terror came to our own street? She was not a trained operative. She was a 60-year-old teacher with a disabled mother. She had every excuse in the world to close her blinds and look away. But she looked at the greatest industrial killing machine in human history and decided to fight it with a forged stamp, a tea kettle, and an unyielding moral compass. She proved that true resistance does not require a uniform. It only requires the radical, unbreakable courage to remain human when your government commands you to be a monster. If Elisabeth's incredible story of quiet, terrifying defiance moved you today, please consider leaving a like on this video to help us share her legacy with the world. Subscribe to the channel to uncover more accurate, unfiltered histories of the women who fought back from the shadows to change the world. Let us know in the comments how her bravery inspired you, and thank you for helping us ensure her real story is never forgotten.